Hey, welcome to Texas Football Talk. I'm your host, Jeremy Lockley, once again joined by my brother Clint. In this episode, got a special guest, Mr. Mike Roach from 247. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Wonderful, Mike, man. Appreciate you being on here. Again, like Jeremy said, we have the special guest, Horns247 Recruiting Editor and Insider, Mike Roach. First and foremost, want to congratulate you on your long-term contract with 247. Big deal, man, because I can tell you, to us, we really started following recruiting a long time ago, Mike, and it's one of the things we keep up with on a daily, and sitting there looking at crystal balls and looking at doing calculators and figure out how many guys are going to get signed and so on and so forth. But, so we appreciate what you do. We appreciate your insight to what you bring to everyone that's on the Horns 247 side. If you're not on there, definitely the place to be if you want great insider information, not just on the football team but recruiting as well. So, I know Jeremy's going to probably ask the first question here, Mike. So all you, Jeremy.
Yes. Yeah. So history, Mike, how did you get into recruiting? How long have you been doing this?
So let me think. I started, how long have I been doing it professionally? Has been since 2014. How long have I been into recruiting? I mean, it's been a while. It's been, weird thing. And I don't talk about this a ton, but like I started off as an Orange Bloods member, just following recruiting. And I really liked that side of it. And I've always been kind of fascinated with the player acquisition side of sports. I'm really into the NFL draft and things like that. And how you find, evaluate, and get players for your team is always a subject that I've loved. So, I was working a straight job. I've always kept in touch with high school football in Texas because most of my best friends are coaches. So I was always kind of tapped into what was going on in the state, even after I was out of high school. And so, I like to write. And I think I told my wife one day, I was like, I wish I had just had time to write. I really enjoy writing. And she was like, well, you should just do it. And so I started doing it. And I kind of geared my thoughts towards how do I get paid to watch high school football for my job? That's what I want to do. That's what I care about. So how do I figure out how to get paid out of this? And so I started kind of doing some team coverage for hornsports.com and had said to those guys, hey, I want to branch out and really dive into recruiting because that's where I think I can make a name for myself. And just knowing coaches and having some ins with a couple of my friends and kind of built it from nothing. I remember just never thinking about ever getting a Twitter account. It was just I looked at Twitter and was like, this is dumb and I'm never going to do it. And I remember they were like, hey, if you're going to do this, you need to be on Twitter. And I just had to build an account from zero, and I think I'm up to 24,000 followers now, but it's crazy to think back. I can remember just crazy benchmarks. The first event I ever covered was Elite 11 Dallas 2014. Charlie Strong had just been hired. Kyler Murray was there throwing, and I asked Kyler Murray was the first interview I ever did. And it was an awful interview. I mean, he was not great to deal with. I can write a book on my thoughts on Murray as a person, but I just asked him a question hey, are you hearing from the new Texas staff? And he just said his answer was, yeah, but that's not happening. And I just tweeted it, and it got picked up by a bunch of Oklahoma and A&M people and retweeted like crazy. And it was kind of my first tweet was oh wow, this is what viral is. So I kind of built it from there and, started working harder at it. And I was lucky enough to be brought on in a part-time role by 24/7 and kind of worked my way up there to where I am now.
That's awesome. I can tell you, and Jeremy's smiling too, because I can tell you Twitter is something that we kind of fell into as well. And I can tell you, Kyler Murray was one of your first tweets. Probably our biggest tweet, if I'd go back and look at it, was probably Quinn yours. The day, I think, right up to that, because really there was a lot of smoke, and then all of a sudden it was fire. And we tweeted out just something, just very, very simple, and it caught fire. And I think that would probably have been our first really big tweet if we go back and look at it. But yeah, us on social media is not, I'm I have a birthday tomorrow and being almost mid 40s, same thing with Jeremy. So trying to catch up and trying to figure all the social media stuff out has been fun for us. So Mike,
I think nowadays my wife would tell you like she wished I was not on, because it's all I ever do now is I just stare at Twitter. So I think she would tell you she would yearn for the days where I wasn't that interested in it. But yeah, it's kind of a necessary part to be on the job.
Yeah. So question, so you do travel and you do have a lot of friends, they're coaches, favorite high schools to visit?
My favorite high schools to visit, I'm going to keep it simple and say I like the ones that like us to be there. So there are some we go to where we're not that welcome. I think some coaches understand they need to have us out there for credibility for the kids, but they're not necessarily the warmest guys. I like to be the ones we're welcome. So a lot of those for me, I'm a Dallas kid. I grew up in Irving, Texas. I live in Fort Worth now. Like my focus, I cover the entire state, but my focus is really DFW. And so I would say South Dallas schools are probably the schools I feel most at home at. So you guys, your alma mater of DeSoto is one that's always very welcoming, and pretty much a school. DeSoto is one of the schools I can just walk in the door unannounced, walk into the head coach's office and sit down, and nobody's going to say anything to me. So DeSoto is on that list. Cedar Hill, South Oak Cliff, all three of those schools are tremendous to deal with. Kennedale strikes me as one. Just I've got a really good relationship with that staff. East Texas has a few that I really love. Texarkana in particular, with Texas High and Pleasant Grove, both schools that I've got a really good relationship with both those coaches and love getting out there. And then I would say there's a couple down in like the Houston and Golden Triangle area, specifically Port Arthur Memorial. That's a great staff. They're always very welcoming. And then in Houston, anytime I'm in Houston, I'll stop by Fort Bend County and either go to, Fort Bend Hightower, which that's kind of changed now because Coach Sam, who was at Hightower, is now at Arlington Bowie. So now, Arlington Bowie continues to be another one that I love stopping at. But it's just kind of anywhere where I've got a good relationship with that coach and I feel like I can go. In fact, I left out McKinney. McKinney is should be top 5 on my list. The last time I went to McKinney, I went and watched practice. The coach ordered lunch for us and we sat in his office and talked ball for 3 hours. So anywhere where I can go have an experience like that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. That is really, really cool. So we did get a question from Marcus Rhodes on our Twitter DM. It was a really, really good question. It was actually to me and Jeremy, but I was like, this is a perfect opportunity to ask this question. So it's a 2-part question. Is it more so that coaches recruit to fit their schemes or recruit the best players available, or both? And then the second part of that question is, do coaches use recruiting sites as a baseline for who to recruit, or do they not put a lot of emphasis on those sites?
Oh, I love that question. I really do. I would say it's a little of both. So obviously they want to get the best players, but those guys have to fit. So, if you have a guy who there's, I think been times where Texas in the past has maybe not looked at your giant defensive tackles at nose that are over 300 pounds, even though, no matter how good they are, but they just didn't feel they fit that scheme. They wanted some smaller, quicker guys at that position. I think that you've got to kind of find the right blend of both. And sometimes you may just have to make a guy work. I mean, sometimes they're just, they're too good of a talent to pass up. Coaches will tell you the 2 biggest lies coaches will tell you all the time is that they don't pay attention to camps and 7-on-7s, and they don't pay attention to what recruiting sites say. I know those are lies because every time I leave a camp or a 7-on-7, I get a call from coaches saying, who look good? Who is this? I mean, we've gotten, not to say when I say I've gotten kids offers, I mean, it's kind of crazy to claim I got them this offer, but I have been able to get film from 7-on-7 for a kid who has never played high school, a high school snap, to a college coach and have an offer to him that day. So they definitely do pay attention to it. They say they don't care about rankings, but yet I can tell you, we've been called at times when they've disagreed with the ranking of a player or something of that nature. So they definitely do. I think a lot of it is they've got to posture a little bit, but yeah, I think I don't know that Texas is necessarily building their board based off of our rankings. But I can tell you that, like, when a new guy pops up out of nowhere, like Brennan Thompson from Spearman, was a nobody this time last year. Evan Stewart was a nobody this time last year. We pushed both those kids to be in our top 247, and about the moment it happened, they started to really blow up. Now, is that because we put them in there, or is that because they just got a little more exposure? I think it's because they got a little more exposure, and more people were able to see them. So, it's always a blend of both, but don't believe college coaches when they tell you this.
Man, just on your comments, I wrote scouting and acquisition, because two things that you talked about. It's not the question I'm going to go with, but I hope we get to meet again or continue this discussion, because I'm a big board guy, top 53 guy when talking NFL, and then 2 deep and 3 deep and how they build their big board, and then scouting, of course. But my question is, what do you get the most from players when they're ranking their importance to go into college? Would it be the development of that coaching staff, or that coaching staff's ability to develop them? Is it generally location and comfortability with the coaching staff, winning program, or academics? What do you hear the most?
I'm going to start this off with a disclaimer that I love 90% of the kids I cover. Love them to death. I couldn't do this job without liking dealing with kids. In fact, I've got a friend who's in kind of the same business who's just like, I hate kids. And I'm like, you're in our business, buddy. That said, kids, and they often change their minds and things. I like think back to Zach Evans and his recruitment. And literally every time I talked to him and said, Zach, what is important for you when you're making a decision, it would change. So with that in mind, I think the most common things are, it's a relationship business. So yes, the relationships definitely matter. They're way up there. Development matters, kind of. I think that kids will tell you development matters a lot, but I don't think they could. There's not a ton of them that can specifically say this school develops like this or fails to develop like this. Now, sometimes it's so glaring as like it's used against them in negative recruiting. In the case of Texas, it's really easy to negative recruit offensive line recruits and just say, look, they don't produce a lot of them. And so I think they look at that, but the kids themselves aren't really looking into these coaches and development, because if they were, I can recall once the new staff came on, they got negative recruited on development or something. And I was just like, well, then you're not even really looking into it, because this is a brand new staff. Like I know it's the same school, but it's new coaches. So you've got to kind of look at what they do versus what the school has done traditionally. So development matters. I think in the end, really what the two biggest things kids will really tell you are the relationships and winning. They want to win. They don't want to lose. Nobody wants to be on a losing team. And I think that's kind of been the biggest thing. It's really amazing. Because, I grew up in, like, when Mac Brown retired, I remember saying, like, that was my coach. I grew up with Mac Brown being the coach at Texas for most of my life. I was born in 1984. By the time I really became, like, conscious of football, I was there for the end of the Makovic years. And then, Mac Brown carried me through high school, college, and all that. So, like, I can remember those teams, and to see, like, the way this decade has gone, again, against the previous decade, it's hard to understand, but like those kids have no comprehension of the early 2000s. They say, I remember, let me go back to Zach Evans, and guys, stop me if I ramble too long on this.
No, you're good. You're good, Mike. We're listening.
I'll go back to Zach Evans. Like, he went on a visit to Texas once, and they introduced him to Ricky Williams. He took a picture with Ricky Williams. And for me, a kid who's 36 years old, that would have been about the coolest thing that could have happened. Mm-hmm. I asked Zach after the visit, like, hey, well, how cool was that? And he was like, who is that guy? They just don't. Kids will say, like, oh, I remember Vince Young, but nowadays I'm like, no, you don't, because you legitimately were not alive, like when he was doing his thing, or you were 2 or 3. So, I would say for the most part, it's always the winning, and they want to. Kids claim to be originals. They're not. They're all followers for the most part, and they want to follow what's cool, and what's cool is winning. And right now it's the SEC and those kind of things, and they don't look into the individual the individual things about it, I think they look and buy into like the big SEC develops storyline and a lot of the negative recruiting. And yeah, the SEC does develop if you're at Alabama or Auburn or LSU and Florida. And if you're anywhere else, it's kind of like it's as much or less than anyone else. So I think it's just a mix. So
so question, everybody that follows recruiting, you actually put, as of April the 6th, you put 2 crystal balls in today. One guy from out of in Arizona, and I think a 2023 commit out of I want to say Arlington Martin, cornerback. I think he's ranked number 4 by 247 in the 2023 class. What determines when and if you put a crystal ball in?
So I've changed a lot on this. You guys mentioned that you love crystal balls, and when I first got into the job, I was like, oh, cool, I get to play this crystal ball game and it'll be fun. And then like I went from being like this kind of no-name reporter at a no-name site, not to disparage Horn Sports, which does a great job and has been kind of like the birthing ground of a lot of reporters in this industry. But like I just didn't have much of a reputation, and all of a sudden I could put in crystal balls. And I remember the first one I put in, and like I put it in for like a kid from Texas who was going to another school like out of state that I knew. And all of a sudden I started getting all these DMs from like fans of that school. Like, what are you? And I was like, oh, this is like a big deal. Like when I put these things in. And so I used to kind of play fast and loose with it. And that'll get you in trouble sometimes, because there's a lot of times where a kid will say, that's my leader. And, I'd put it in and not really follow back up with the kid. And then all of a sudden, they change their mind and things like that. So there's no like, I wouldn't say there's any like codified rules and regulations for when I put one in. Like I'll be, to be honest, I'll break down both those crystal balls I put in today. Zach Swanson from Brophy Prep in Phoenix. I have never talked to that kid in my life. Apparently he is a ghost and impossible to get a hold of, talking to our West Coast guys. But talking to people at Texas, I really love the buzz I've heard there on that side. I've coordinated that with our West Coast guys who have talked to him. They are hearing a lot of buzz on his side. And so in that case, it's just kind of putting 2 and 2 together and kind of rolling with it. And I really hate doing out-of-state ones, because it's like, unless I've got a really good source near that kid, it's hard to really feel a ton of confidence. I'm kind of just going out on faith. And, if that kid changes his mind, if a kid here changes his mind, I usually hear about it, or, I can detect that. It's hard to do with a guy like that. With Javian Taviano out of Arlington Martin, that's a kid that from the moment he was offered by the previous staff has been, just telling me great things about Texas. And I just get the vibe. It's like, I can't really describe it, but I look at him, I look at kind of the personality fit he is for Texas. I look at the fact that he's got a teammate signed with Texas and Maurice Blackwell. He's got a teammate committed to Texas and Travell Johnson. And when you talk to him about Texas, he visibly lights up, and you can kind of just see it. It takes time doing the job, but you can kind of see it. And so, talking to him, I just kind of got the feeling that, he may be the next guy in 2023. I think Texas is building a little bit of a pipeline to Martin. It's all guesswork, right? And I got into an argument with a coworker once because they put in a crystal ball for a kid to their school, and I said something like, it's just guesswork. And they were mad that I said that. And I was like, well, it's all guesswork. We're all just taking a kid's word for it. Or, in that case, I might as well tell all the stories now that we're telling stories. It was Jahari Rogers' recruitment, and it was our Florida guy had put a Florida crystal ball in. And I said, well, and I, knowing that Jahari Rogers had filmed a commitment video to Texas, I had said, I'm not worried about it. I think they're guessing. And the guy got mad at me for saying he was guessing. And I was like, well, we're all guessing. I'm guessing, even though I know he's filmed a Texas commitment video. So, I mean, it turns out he had filmed a Florida commitment video as well. So, it's all guesswork. I know that people love it. I know that it's a great marketing tool. It's probably one of the greatest innovations in recruiting is a coverage is the crystal ball. But, at times we're just kind of saying this guy is trending this way at this point in time. That doesn't mean it's not going to change in a month or two. And I think that's where people get mad. I've seen a lot of people say, like, if you put a pick in, you shouldn't be able to change it at all. And in reality, that's just not the way recruiting goes. Like, kids change their mind as much as they change their underwear. So, it's one of those things that we've got to be able to, the crystal ball should be showing trends, and it should be showing the way recruitment is flowing. And it shouldn't be a one-time set in stone kind of decision.
Yeah. I agree, because we had an opportunity to talk to really some kids from our alma mater at that Pylon 7-on-7 in Dallas, and you talk to them, and you start talking to them, hey, what schools are talking to you, or what offers do you have, and so on and so forth, and just get an idea from them. It's a tough decision, and I think it's even tougher now because over the last couple of years, because of the ability not to be able to do, official and unofficial visits. I think that plays a big role into it too. Do you think, off topic real quick, do you think the ability, if they open them back up, official and unofficial visits, do you think that helps Texas moving forward into the season?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the funny thing is like last year, Texas obviously didn't recruit great last year with that staff. But I couldn't even hold it against most of them because 8/10 of that staff was brand new, and I never got to see them recruit with the ability to host kids on campus. And what is one of the greatest things Texas can sell is the city of Austin and the campus and all those sorts of things. I mean, that's part of the experience. It's the facility. It's all that. And so you can only do so much through a Zoom meeting, and I think that it's hard. It was hard to quantify really how good recruiters those one-year guys were. Like, I know, Jay Valai had a great reputation. I thought Jay Valai did a great job being, just a relentless recruiter. But again, I would have loved to have seen Jay Valai be able to host kids on an official visit and things like that, and to see where it goes. So it definitely helps. It always gets the excitement going. I mean, Texas is easy. It's an easy sell. Austin is an easy sell. So, I'm really excited for the summer. It feels like it's been so long. And it has. I mean, the last visitor Texas hosted in any sort of capacity was Kamar Wheaton a little over a year ago. He was the last guy. I remember I got the interview with him, and it's legitimately, as soon as I got off the phone, saw on Twitter that the NCAA had instituted a dead period that we are still in. So wow. It's always going to help, especially with, the South End Zone is not done, but it's a lot more presentable than it was during the fall. Being able to kind of go back and show off the locker rooms again and a lot of the new facilities, it's going to just create some excitement. I mean, Texas is always a big hit for people who are on campus.
Nice.
All right, so Mike, the next question is, it's easy to identify positions of strength in 247's rankings, looking at the wide receiver position, offensive line, safety. What's that one position group you're looking at across the state of Texas that may be a concern at this point?
In the 22 class, you mean?
In 2020, yes, 22.
For me, it's not a great quarterback. It's a good quarterback year. It's not a great quarterback year, despite having the number one recruit in the country play quarterback in the state, and two other really good ones in Kate Klubnik and Connor Weigman, both in the state. It's still not. I mean, last year was just such a deep quarterback year. It was like 11 or 12 guys who went big time. So it's not a great one. Running back's not great. Tight end is always a struggle. Tight end and linebacker are two positions in Texas that always struggle to have the depth. Now, they might have, every few years, they might have an exceptional talent. They might have just off the top of my head, a Harold Perkins like they have this year, or even a Donovan Green. But they don't typically have the numbers. And I think a lot of that is the proliferation of the spread offense and defenses where guys are playing safety probably too big, and then you've got to convince a safety to come play linebacker or a receiver to play tight end and things like that. And so those are the two positions that usually struggle. I don't love corner in this class either. It's not as deep as it usually is.
Okay. All right. Cool. So everybody's excited about offensive line, or actually, I guess the offensive line recruiting over the last couple of years it's been pretty blah. What does the offensive line recruiting look like at the end of the 2022 cycle for the University of Texas?
I think it's going to be a good class. And a reason for that is I'm more confident in the recruiting abilities of Kyle Flood than I was in the abilities of Herb Hand. And, frankly, I know people don't want to hear it. I've had some arguments with people over it. Herb Hand seemed like a really nice guy. And every dealing I had with him, he was, fine guy to talk to. There are too many kids that I spoke with that just said, like, we didn't hear from him a whole lot, and so when you the one thing that stands out to me is as critical as that offensive line class was last year, when it comes down to it, and we know we need these guys. We know we got to really cash in on this class. I mean, Savion Byrd at the beginning of his recruitment was kind of a lead pipe cinch to Texas. I mean, I was told pretty bluntly when Jaquindon Jackson had committed that, like, Savion Byrd will walk through hell for Jaquindon Jackson. He will go wherever he wants him to go. And so the fact that it got to a point where Savion Byrd felt like, Texas had gone all in on the Brockermeyers, and it kind of put him on the back burner and lost contact with them for a month and a half. For a kid like that to lose contact with your staff for a month and a half, that's a long time. I mean, that puts you out of the race, especially when you're dealing with LSU and Oklahoma as the contenders. So, I believe in Kyle Flood's recruiting abilities, talking to kids. He's been a lot more consistent with that contact. And he's got the record to sell as far as development as well. So I think, this is the year too, where, like, the thing that really saved Herb Ham was I thought he did a really good job in 2020, but there are types of players that I felt Herb Hand thrived in recruiting, and they were the suburb kids who were probably going to Texas no matter what. And it all lined, and it's not really across the board that way, but that really lined up in 2020. When you talk about Jake Majors, Logan Parr, Andre Karich, and then Jalen Garth was going to Texas because of Rashawn Johnson anyways. So, the other three guys that fits kind of Herb's profile great, where frankly, he didn't have to do a ton of work to get them. And I think he's a really good coach. I just don't think he was that interested in recruiting. And so I don't know that he was down to mix it up and get into those battles for kids like Savion Byrd and, a couple of others. So I really think that Flood's got it. I think the mix of kids this year that are kind of what I would call like Texas type kids, the Cole Hudsons of the world, or the Nato Umazulos of the world, who are high academic kids that want to study business, but are also really good offensive linemen. There's a lot of those in this class. And I think that kind of matches up well for Texas.
Awesome, man. Thank you. You have follow-on questions, Jeremy? Follow-up questions? I know you're writing some stuff down over there.
Well, because we talked about scouting and acquisition, which is really, really close to my heart. Trying to build, like I said, the best roster, for Texas, 2 deep across the board. But going back to you talking about seeing a kid and sharing that information with the coach, how much scouting experience do you have to have in order to do what you do? Or is that something that you just develop over time?
It's something you develop over time, and it's something that you have to prove to coaches. Like, they're not just going to take your word for it. I remember building sources with, on the first Herman staff, and like, just kind of my first questions were, what do you look for? So that I know if I'm out, and I find a player at your position, I can kind of look for a lot of those traits and then say, hey, have you seen this kid? And so, like, I got a good idea with what each coach was looking for. And then I could say I wasn't going to waste my time sending them a kid that doesn't really, if they're telling me, like, the first Herman staff, let's use safety for an example, right? The first Herman staff love big safeties. They love the BJ Fosters, DeMarvion Overshones, Tyler Owens, big giant guys who could run. And, being able to talk to them and find those guys and send them onto the staff, I got a good idea. Well, when Chris Ash came in, talking to people around him, it was like, well, we don't like those guys. We want 5'11" to 6', 190 safeties who can cover in space. So I wasn't sending him giant safeties anymore, So it's kind of proving, and you got to hit a couple times. You got to hit early with, hey, have you seen this kid? Check this kid out. And then they look at him and go, oh, why didn't this kid have any offers? And you're constantly proving yourself to them. The funniest thing is I usually do once a year, twice a year, I do my own rankings for the state of Texas, just because I see so many kids. And one of the wrinkles I've kind of put into it is I've added like a little part that says, here are the settings I've evaluated them in. And I've got like 5 categories. It's obviously every kid gets a film evaluation from me, but I'll also put, if I saw them in practice, in a game, in 7-on-7, in a camp setting, or in like a private training setting. And so I will always put that on the rankings so that when somebody looks at those rankings, it's not just saying, oh, Mike made this up. Like they can look and see, oh, he saw this kid in multiple settings, and has him right here. And I remember a new coach reaching out to me, not even from Texas, he was from another school. And he was like, hey, I think I need to get to know you. And I was like, why is that? And he was like, well, I read your rankings, and you ranked 100 kids and you had seen 98 of them in person. And I was like, yeah. He was like, yeah, I think I need to get to know you. So doing the work matters, getting out there. I think I've kind of always felt I had an eye for that sort of thing. It's kind of just sharpening it on my own. I have looked at maybe taking some classes with like the scouting, the Scouting Academy, and stuff like that. But honestly, excuse me. Honestly, I looked into the Scouting Academy and I spoke to a personnel guy I know who is on staff at that academy and asked him like, hey, is this worth my time? And he said, you have so many contacts at the college level. You should just use those guys to sharpen your own skills and do your own self-development. You probably don't need to pay $800 for this class. Like when you've got the contacts that you do. So, a lot of it is bouncing it off people. I've got, like, I think if you asked me, what do you feel is the best position you evaluate? I would say defensive backs. Like I have a pretty good eye for defensive backs. I know kind of what I look for in a perfect defensive back for me. But I've also got friends who are defensive back trainers or former defensive backs that I will always bounce something off of and say, here's what I think about this kid. Can you give me your opinion as well? And I've got a buddy who's a former running back coach at the college level that I'll bounce running backs off of. And offensive line is probably my worst position. So I've got lots of people I bounce that off of. So it's a lot of just kind of looking, listening, and soliciting feedback from those around you.
Very cool. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I think last question. Obviously, it's going to be recruiting related. It's going to be Texas related. What is the final number for the 2022 class, and is it going to be offensive or defensive driven?
I think it's going to be a full class from everything I hear. I would say 25 plus. So I would guess, I'm trying to do quick math in my head of the roster. I would say it will be slightly offensive driven, given Sark is an offensive guy. I think his first class will be slightly offensive driven. I think they're going to want to add some playmakers. They didn't add a ton of playmakers. I mean, the kids they signed last year are all fine kids, but frankly, outside of a couple who I think could be like some hidden gem types, they didn't sign a class that was to the level that Texas usually has. And I would expect a lot of those kids to wash out in the next couple of years, if we're being frank. So I think that his priority is going to be adding playmakers to the offensive side of the ball and really building in the trenches and rebuilding that offensive line.
Yeah.
We appreciate, yeah. You got anything to add, Jeremy? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, we talked about this earlier because that 21 class was so heavy on the defensive side of the football that we kind of said the same thing, just looking at the roster as a whole. 25 and 27, we thought like 17 on offense, 10 on defense, because you didn't get very many linemen. This lineman class is so thick that we thought 17, 10. Maybe the shakeup would be at the end of the year. But
yeah, I mean, I could see it. I could see them even going over 25, adding the early signees to last year's class. And, maybe you go 17, 12, 17, 13, something like that, and then sign a couple extras. I could see it being really offensive heavy. I mean, just off the top of my head, they're going to take a quarterback. They're going to take 2 running backs. They're going to take 3 to 4 receivers. So that's 7, 8 right there. It would surprise me if they didn't take 5 offensive linemen, at least 4. And then I think they'd like to take a couple tight ends if they can. So.
Wow. Cool. Well, we appreciate you joining us tonight, Mike. We really, really do. Hopefully we can get you on again after maybe they do some official visits, around the June mark, July mark. If you join us, we'd really do appreciate it. Hey, thank you for what you do. I can tell you that we're members of Horns247. We stay on there. The stuff that you drop this afternoon that you usually drop Mike and Nike. That's the things I usually, before I go to bed, I'm scrolling Horns247, reading Mike and Nike, and then going to bed. But we appreciate you being on here. We appreciate you answering our questions. Any last thoughts, man, before you get off here? No,
man, you guys do a great job. It was a pleasure meeting you guys a couple weeks ago in Prosper at that 7-on-7 tournament. I love that. This is obviously a passion thing for both of y'all. So it was cool to see you getting out there and getting into the scene. And that's really how you do it. I mean, kids ask me all the time, how do I get into this business? And I'm like, just go, man. Like, nobody's stopping you from going out there and seeing kids and, doing the thing. You may not get hired by 24/7 right off the bat, but you can always do it somewhere. So it was cool to see you guys out there. I'm down. Like, my thing is, so like when I started out as an independent reporter and I had a podcast, my thing was always, I would love to get I cannot say the Mike Roaches of the world, because that would be me being way too I'm just not comfortable with being that confident in myself. Getting guys like Chip Brown or Jeff Howe to join on my podcast. So now that I am in a more prominent role, I always try to, if somebody reaches out and wants to be on, I remember trying to build my own brand back then and always try to come back around and give that back to them. So anytime you guys want me on, I'm happy to talk. My wife will. Look, you guys can see me on video here. I've got a setup. I've got a microphone. My wife will tell you I love to hear myself talk. So it's true. And so I would say just if anybody's listening or watching out there and you haven't subscribed to Horns 24/7, please do. If you hear me on a podcast, you get, excuse me. Sorry, guys. If you hear me, you get the, what I would call the nuggets, but you can get the whole meal at Horns 24/7. And what you guys are referring to today is usually I'll do Mike at night at 10 o'clock every night. And it's just kind of a wrap up of what I heard throughout the day. And I had so much good news today. And if you'll notice, I have a column that I call Afternoon Delight, which I'm sure you guys know the song. And when I came up with it, I'd explain to my wife what the song meant. And she was like, oh, okay, I get it. So I only really do it when it's all good news. I would never write a bad nugget in an Afternoon Delight because I feel the title would be misleading. So, I left Martin today. I picked up a couple of different nuggets elsewhere from a couple different calls, and I was like, I got a lot of good news, so I don't want to wait till 10. I want everybody to read it now. I'm gonna do an Afternoon Delight when I get home, and I'll put it out. So that's just kind of a notes package I did. It was 850 words today, so a lot of good stuff in there. Nick Harris, my partner over there at Horns 24/7, does a phenomenal job covering recruiting with me. He also does basketball recruiting, which thank the Lord, because I can't say I'm basketball the sport. So, somebody's got to do it, but it's not going to be me. And we do a podcast as well called The State of Recruiting. So if anybody's interested in that, you can find us basically anywhere you get a podcast. And we'll put those links, some of those links in there, Mike, in the comment section of our podcast. But I'm pretty sure anybody that's actually watching us is already following you. I can tell you that now, Mike. I would hope so. Yeah, I would hope so too. At this particular point, because it does. I can tell you a lot of our conversation that we have on our lives goes to, a lot of it turns into recruiting conversation, especially in the off season. But we do appreciate you coming on here. Usually I'm the one that's usually talking a lot, but definitely wanted to listen to you tonight, and we do appreciate it. And thanks for coming on with us tonight, Mike. Appreciate it. Well, thanks for letting me ramble, boys. I appreciate it. Absolutely. All right. Good night, Mike. Later. Thanks. We'll talk to you later. All right. Bye. Yeah, I really want to thank Mike Roach from 247 for joining us. What a pleasant experience, man. Great guy to talk to. Absolutely, man. A lot of great information, insight into recruiting. It's nice that we can reach out to him here in the near future and get him on the show again. If you like the podcast, please hit that like button. If you have not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. You can find us on Twitter at TX Football Talk, on Facebook at Texas Football Talk, and on Instagram at Texas Football Talk. We appreciate you listening as always, and hook 'em. Hook 'em.